Hello and welcome back to the Power Podcast. It is me, Joe, followed with Alex and Sam again. How are you guys? How are you guys doing in this not so dark evening?
Well, I've not been feeling too good. I don't know if that's like a precursor to this podcast, the darkness encroaching. But ironically, I haven't been feeling too hot today. I've been mostly sitting with trying to get rid of migraines with like the lights off and stuff, so having the darkness comfort me. So I'm really getting into character for today for today's podcast.
Just
Well,
been silently wishing everyone would die at Tesco. So that's just
That's
festering.
no different from any other day.
I
That's
think,
no
I
different.
think
True.
I've actually had a lighter day than you guys have, because I haven't wanted to kill myself or other people. So this is
You don't work in retail, Joe.
not anymore,
You
but I
noticed
do
progress?
remember it. So yeah, so maybe that's it. Maybe it's because I don't work in retail.
And when
Don't
you
know
do,
the
it's like,
struggles.
I'm finally free.
I'll deal with those sick meat bags full of disease and pestilence.
Nope. I'm just moving my laptop. And of course it had to make the most squeaky
Yeah,
sound.
it's like someone came in. It's like, just someone who shopped at Tesco and said, I heard you talking shit, Sam.
So this
You know what?
week,
They would agree with me.
fair enough. This week, we're talking about powers of the darkness, or powers of darkness, or dark manipulation, shadow manipulation, whatever. Either way, I just like to call it the Darkness Hour. So, obviously, there are a lot of powers to do with darkness. I want to hear from you guys, like, at least, I'll say one each, and then we'll rotate back, and then I will talk about just a small list that I'll try and speed run through. So, Sam, what's your one? And then we'll move on to Alex, and then we'll do it again.
Definitely going to talk about the darkness from the darkness.
I knew this was coming.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I believe in a thing
The
called love.
Hey.
Go on.
Oh, that's what we're going to start off the thing with. I forgot about that.
We were going to
No.
do that intro, but we kind of ran out of time.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about The Darkness, the video game and the comic book series from Dark Horse, which is great. Read it. But the Darkness is a primordial entity that existed before God or with God. It's never really confirmed. The Darkness essentially kind of gives not possessed, but actually, yeah, it gets possessed. It pretty much goes to people and gives them supernatural powers, like body armor and the ability to create darklings and minions. But they can only do this during the night or in shadows. In the light, they're weakened. They can actually be killed by sustained sunlight. Essentially, I think it's a weapon called like the Sun Sword that can actually just kill you outright if at the dark. Yeah, humble. It's a convoluted history.
It's kind of interesting because it does come from that sort of almost biblical sense of darkness, where it's like the darkness before the light, and then obviously God said, "Let there be light." Because it does kind of almost beg the question of, is darkness the most primordial essence? Because technically, when the light fades, there is nothing but dark. I hate to get all Dark Soulsian on y'all, but that's pretty much exactly what they say. When the light fades, or when the fire fades, there is nothing but dark.
I mean, they even use that for the intro of the second game about like how darkness was happy, and then God said, "Let there be light," and he was very much unhappy. I mean, I should say the reason I say he is because darkness is always goes into always the male. In this case, Jack Estacado and the Estacado line, whereas light is the Angelus, which is always a female.
Yeah.
Human female persona.
Also, it's kind of like, I like it, like, the darkness itself is kind of like very animalistic as well. It's like,
Yes, like it's
kind of gross and
It's actually
ugh.
unique to most of the ones that I've got on here, because other than creatures made from darkness that can manipulate darkness, this is actually a primordial being that is darkness itself. That is actually personified darkness of the most literal sense.
And it's got some great voice actors when they do the very creepy voice whenever it's trying to control you and calls you my puppet.
Yeah, that's
a video game.
That's not nightmarish at all. Because it usually takes the form of like two snaky sort of spiky tendrils in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, like two over the shoulder snakes. Although those don't actually talk. Those don't actually talk to you.
No.
Funnily enough, it's a voice in your head.
Yeah.
And they can create black holes.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and they get more power by eating people's hearts, because that's legit.
I mean that makes less and less sense, but Alex,
the darkness in people's hearts. Anyway, but yeah,
Alex, what about you? God. What about you? Like, what's your?
Well, actually, I think that's probably the most emo, but I've got a good contender here from DC. Is it the Shade? Who is a reformed supervillain who has darkness and manipulation powers that he's taken from a place called the Shadowlands, which is basically an entire dimension that is just pure dark energy. And it's semi-mystical, because like a lot of magic users, can tap into the Shadowlands, but at the same time, his was just purely an accident. He, tripped and fell and gained these powers, including immortality. And how his immortality works is like seems to be intimately connected to this like parallel dimension of shadow, and shadows can't die. Like,
okay.
If he's severed from, hypothetically, if he's severed from his shadow, like literally, his shadow, and also from the Shadowlands, then he can die hypothetically, but that hasn't happened yet because he's incredibly powerful. In fact, he's probably the most powerful shadow user or dark manipulator in the DC universe at the moment. And he's been alive since the Victorian era, so he dresses accordingly with a big jaunty top hat.
Of course, as you do.
Of course you do, and he's very pale skinned, very Neil Gaiman, as you do, because what else are you going to dress as if you've got dark powers? And he's got similar powers. I mean, he's got darkness manipulation in that he can control this dark power to basically just, attack people with, to cloud himself in shadow and become like invisible. He's also got darkness teleportation, so he can like travel between Earth and the Dark Zone. Basically, he just uses the pocket dimension power to go from one place to the other. He can create constructs with the darkness. He can command and summon demons from the dark realm, and he can use it for force fields and for like energy beams made entirely out of this dark matter. So yeah, he is to be feared. He's also got a very complicated backstory in which, because of his immortality, the same family that he like had a beef with, like back in the early days, just keeps having babies, and they all come back and try to assassinate him and screw with him.
Of course.
In some way, which is just like sense. Yeah, that makes. I mean, it is kind of sad in a way because like it's one of those DC things where he even falls in love with one of them. She tricks him enough and tries to poison him, and the poison doesn't work. And she's all like, "I love you, but I have to be loyal to my family, so I'm gonna kill myself now." Bye. And then he becomes more emo and twisted.
Okay, so basically he gains his power from another dimension. He's immortal and he has lived for hundreds of years. It's what it reminds me. It's similar to Scarlet Witch from Marvel, but instead of darkness, hers is just chaos. So it's kind of like, instead of him being like a wizard in the same style, it's more like either warlock or sorcerer, where he actually sort of like he taps into this massive amount of power, because he's actually more.
That's the thing, because there is actually magic in the DC universe, and he is actually more powerful than the magic users, because to him it is just natural. Like it's a complete fluke.
Similar to Speedsters with the Speed Force.
Yeah. Exactly. I was going to say that it's like instead of the Speed Force, he has I don't think it's just the Shadowlands because they can't use Dark Force because that's Marvel. Sorry, I just remembered. So, copyright. They can't call it the Dark Force. They have to
I'm
call it the
sure they
Shadowlands.
tried. I'm sure because they do have the negative Speed Force. I'm sure they tried. Okay, so Sam, do you have a second one?
Yes, I do, and I'm surprised Alex didn't. Surprised Alex hasn't thought of this, considering it is also includes the Shadowlands.
I think
Force?
you might do.
Is it the mask? The mask, the cartoon mask. There's a character called Skillet.
Oh
Who
no!
is-
I have forgotten about this actually.
Who is a kind of, is like a parody of Peter Pan,
Okay.
and he essentially he comes from a place called the Shadowlands, or like a dimension, so to speak. And he has the power to take other people's shadows to keep himself young. So, because whenever people lose their shadows, they begin to age rather rapidly.
Oh, okay.
And much like Peter Pan, he can control his own shadow. His shadow is like another entity, or at least as a part of him, so to speak. But it can leave his body. It can move like Peter Pan's shadow and leave. But whenever he loses his shadow, it happens in the first episode where like he has to go back into the Shadowland before daylight, or else it takes like a year or so for him to return. For reasons.
Okay, so
He loses his shadow and all of his powers.
This reminds me of a power. I'm sorry, not sorry, Sam. From One Piece.
No.
Take a drink.
About the mask.
And
About the mask cartoon.
It's a devil fruit called the Shadow fruit or the Kage fruit, which basically allows the user to manipulate their shadow as if it is a completely different or malleable being. He can shapeshift it into bats, monsters, all kinds of different creatures. But the guy who has this power is so damn lazy. All he does is either turn it into a shadow form of himself or a shadow form of bat. But they are strong enough to be considered as like dense as actual steel or like brick, like solid stone. On top of this, though, he can sever the ties between a person and their shadow, and he can store up the shadows in himself to make himself more powerful, or he can actually shove them into a dead body, and when he does that, the dead body comes back to life, and it has actions and personalities based off of the shadow, but it actually has memories based off of the original person who died. So say for instance, like you shoved like the shadow of like, I don't know, like some like erratically dangerous person into like a really timid person. It would be like the timid person would come back to life and have all their memories, but then they'd act really sort of erratically and really dangerously, even if they didn't know what was going on with them. So anyway, so this is the thing. The victims of this, however, they have to stay away from sunlight, because otherwise, if they do, they will disintegrate. Because without a shadow, light passes through them, and the most dangerous light of them all is the sun. And the sun will just disintegrate them into nothing.
I mean, I prefer the masks one, where they begin to take it like almost like a new like beauty thing. Like, oh, have you lost your shadow? Like, look at mine. Doesn't it make me look slimming?
Yeah.
That's the first thing that they even joke about. That's like the first thing they joke about is that, I mean, before they become really old, like it takes like a couple of days. So that they're just like saying, "See, do you know something different about me?"
What about?
I mean, and like he's lived for 4,000 years, he's known every people with the mask.
They do something.
Apparently,
similar.
Abe Lincoln also had the mask.
Well, they do something similar in the show where they actually give like the main character like 100 shadows. Like they just stuff him full of 100 shadows, and he basically has all of the fighting techniques of like 100 different people and the strength of 100 different people, and he's really powerful. But after 5 minutes, all of the shadows shoot out of him, and the user of this power is able to grab hold of them and basically store them into himself again. I have to be honest, that arc is not great, but that power is kind of an interesting one. It's just such a shame that the user of it is not very inventive. Alex, what about you? Do you have a second one?
Actually, yeah, I do. It's weird because when I was like researching Shade from DC, there was also a character called Shade in the Marvel universe, which is absolutely the freaking opposite of this character. It literally everywhere. It is the first drag queen superhero. Uh,
Okay.
Originally called Shade, but now I guess due to like copyright, they call themselves Dark Veil.
Okay.
And yeah, basically they use their darkness powers as part of their like drag persona as an entertainer, in creating like cool shadows with a giant fan, and also just generally being an entertainer and stuff. But also their main power is darkness teleportation. So they basically flick their fan. Sorry, flick their fan. Yeah, flick the fan and create a gateway
Yeah.
through the dark force dimension, and they can go there. Unfortunately, there are downsides to this, of course, because you have to go through quickly, and you can only get in and out through Darkveil's fan. So it is possible. Like, unfortunately, she lost a friend in the Dark Force dimension because they, fell into it, escaped into it, but couldn't be found again. And from that day forth, from this horrible tragic event, Darkveil has vowed to use her powers of dark for light and good in the world. And I think that's just her entire concept. She's just sunny and bright and just, 100%, a good guy, and I just kind of like the contrast as well. Like, I think that's the whole concept of her. It's the fact that she has quite dark and, a dark backstory and dark powers, but they are the embodiment of sunshine and happiness. So
Yeah.
yeah, and now you know that Dark Veil exists, everybody.
Dark Veil. I'll have to have a look at that because I mean, obviously, whenever I research any kind of power users, I do like to see how people use powers differently. I've never heard of Dark Veil or Shade, so I'm going to look those two up. And obviously, is it Shadow Man? Did you say?
Oh, it's the Shadowlands. Oh no, wait. You mean Sam's one? Or...
Sam's one, yeah. Because I know about Jackie from the Darkness.
Skillet.
The joke because like pan skillet, as you know.
Oh.
That's it's meant to be literally just a joke on that.
Well, I have a list, and I will go down them as quickly as possible. But yes,
I mean, I have one more I want to say, but I'll say afterwards.
I had so. I mean, well, we've got an entire another segment that we need to get through before this, but I was just going to say so. Immediately, I talked about that one from a One Piece reference. There is another One Piece reference, which is Blackbeard, who has the power of the dark fruit. He can turn his entire body into darkness and create darkness as well as manipulate it. When he creates the darkness, it can have the same effect of gravity, as he can either create basically a smoke-like energy that basically can swallow up things, like as if it's a black hole into another dimension. He can also use it to control it similar to the forms of gravity, and he can pull other people towards him, where as soon as he touches them, the darkness swallows up their abilities, nullifying their other devil fruit powers. Later on, he is then able to steal another person's devil fruit abilities, and he now has two. Supposedly, we are led to believe that this fruit's ability allows the user to have two devil fruits at once. The only person who has ever been able to do such a thing in all of the series. Now, that is a pretty cool power. There's a lot of downsides to it, such as apparently he feels double the amount of pain. There are certain other limitations, but they're not 100% fully clear exactly as to what they fully are. But either way, it's just, again, that's just a quick one. Next one I was actually going to talk about is the is Shikamaru Nara, or the Nara clan from Naruto. Basically, Shikamaru has the ability of shadow manipulation jutsu, where if his shadow connects to someone else's, he can actually make them do the exact same mirrored physical actions. But he can also do other ones later on, where he can make his shadows stitch things and also strangle people and stuff. I'm just going down my list as quickly as I can. There is another set one which I very much like, which is obviously as you said, any dark manipulations to do with like dark dimensions. There is D&D, which is like sort of that sort of like shadow and dark realm, as like certain dark powers are considered just like evil or necrotic. And finally, 7 Deadly Sins. In 7 Deadly Sins, they have the demons, and the demon race have this ability where they can manipulate darkness, which comes from their own magical prowess. Now, some of them have the ability to manipulate it so that their blood is also part darkness. And when they manipulate darkness, they either show a form of like blackened tattoos around their body, or they can actually show as like actual physical manifestations of objects. The main character, Meliodas, and also other characters later on in the series can do this and create flames of purgatory, which cannot be put out easily, and can even potentially create scars on semi-immortal and immortal characters. They can create darkness that allows them to reattach limbs and even heal parts of their body. However, it is stated that it does not restore the stamina of which that did. So I guess in a D&D circumstance, or even a tabletop RPG, it's kind of like, you can reattach your limbs and make sure that your heart is like put together again, but you still maintain the damage, meaning that you don't like go from like, I don't know, 20 HP to 30. You just stay at 20 HP if you lost a certain amount of hit points. But they do a load of different weird and crazy things with it. And finally, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Who could forget Pride? Who literally, his power is to manipulate shadows. And he gets it from his father, aka Father. The homunculus, the first ever homunculus, who is made of darkness. And as is stated, he comes from nothing, and therefore he will return to nothing. And his firstborn son, Pride, has his very father's ability, which is the power to manipulate the shadows. So, that's
so
all
creepy
of them.
As well.
That is so creepy. It's so good. And I wanted to point out, darkness is so malleable in a lot of shows. It can be used to blunt attack people. It can be used for a smoke. It can be used as a gas, solid, liquid, plasma. It can be used as a multi-form where it can slice through things perfectly. Because some people sometimes do the bullshit thing of, oh, it's as thin as a shadow. Okay. Whatever that means. So, yeah, it is. There's something, as Sam said, there's something primordial about it that makes it interesting. And
I mean,
with the demons, it is brilliant the way that they do it in 7 Deadly Sins. I'm gonna stop now because I'm fanboying too much. But I'll let Sam. I'll let you comment, and then we'll move on to our next section.
Most because actually, I was going to say, it is quite literally primordial in the Greek theology, or the ancient Greek theology, because of Nyx, the first primordial being. I mean, like, semi-first. She came from chaos, which is another kind of being. But, she is the goddess of the night. And she is more powerful than even Zeus.
Okay.
Wow.
Which, she is pretty much one of the few people that Zeus is openly afraid of.
I mean, it is very similar to a lot of situations where it's like, just because that there are very powerful gods doesn't mean that there wasn't something before them, or there wasn't something, or isn't something that could kill them.
Because, like, we all know the vague story of the Titans, of Zeus, beating up his father and such. Before them, there were the primordials. Like, as I told you, like, the gods, they go lower ranking, so they get more specialized. It was just she was just darkness. Or, the night, essentially. Till she made Erebus, who is darkness. Modified, but you get my meaning. And also, one last one I have to say, because Connor brought this up, and I would feel bad if I didn't mention it at least once. Of course, Darkheart! The Care Bears movie.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the second Care Bears movie,
Yeah.
The Next Generation.
Anyway,
I'm pretty sure it's the subtitle.
Moving on very swiftly from that. So we've had our examples, but yeah. So I think we should now talk about. So obviously we've said that quite a lot of these characters who actually have them end up being or are actually villains at some point or bad guys at some point. Whether they are begin off as people who are not villains and then turn into them, or whether or not they start off being quite bad guys and then reform into better people. I don't think I've ever seen a character that is straight up just a good character all around and never changes, despite the fact that they have darkness.
Well, with the exception now of Darkvale, who was good, but bad things happened to them, so it was like.
See, well, no, that's still
again,
my point though, because they
Yeah.
were good and then turned bad, or were bad and then turned good.
They didn't turn bad. It's just that they had like a tragic, thing happen to them, and it's not that they turned evil because of that. They've always been a hero.
Oh, so they've
And I
never
think
never done bad things then. So
they've never done bad things ever.
Okay,
Like
okay.
it's just that it's like with great power comes great responsibility.
I'll be
sort of
reading
thing,
up on this, and if at any point there's a moment where they turn bad, I'm gonna be like, Alex,
I'm pretty sure
someone
that
tell him fibbies.
No, I'm pretty sure that Darkvale was created to kind of like push back against that stereotype, because you're right, it is kind of a trope, people who have darkness powers either are, on the side of evil, or they've
Super
been
edgy.
villains. Yeah, they're super edgy. They've been in sort of like, they are literally cloaked in darkness. They are edgelords. At least at some point in their life. I mean, even Raven as well has has the ability to be evil when she wants to be, but she has to actively fight against it because she's fighting against her destiny. And it's like,
You turn evil like 4 times.
Yeah, just four times,
I'm pretty sure twice were willing. Like,
I want to point out, it counts even if it's only once. But anyway, so we've talked about that, but what we're actually going to talk about is actually the power itself. Now, obviously, it is the usual generic thing of the darkness, and what it means is the darkness. It just means something that is of essence of good or of light or whatever. But the main thing is that like some form of power to manipulate what we consider dark, either to be the absence of light, it could be just a shadow in general, or it could actually just be like actually being from another dimension that is void of existence. In Anamite Tales, we actually have the realm known as the Void, which is just a place where universes eventually disappear after the suns all go out, and eventually like life just no longer exists. And pretty much it's like it's very reminiscent of something that I didn't realize that actually existed until I watched the series known as Supernatural. And there's 2 big things on this. Oh, it's happening. One is known as the Darkness, aka Amara, aka God's sister, and the other one is the Big Empty, a dimension where anything goes to die that do not have souls, because then their existence, they just sleep in an empty black void of nothing. And the empty has a personality, but it's never been awake until one of the beings is awoken whilst being in the empty. And it's only because it's like, basically, to not give any spoilers, something is awoken in the empty who died at some point, and then the empty is furious because they can't continue to sleep until all things in the empty are asleep, because the whole point of the empty is it's not empty if someone is awake. And it's just this really horrible thing of it's just pure dark nothing. And so that's pretty much what the Void is in Anamite Tales. But it actually has a god that was basically sent to be destroyed there, so to sort of be sent and be erased. But instead, he became the very being of the Void and created his own sort of cult and pact. And eventually, people actually gained the power to manipulate dark energy and darkness. So, in this, we actually have it that Sam, you've played as a character who actually had dark manipulation powers. That was your first ever character that you ever played when joining us. Alex, you've never played as a character who's ever used darkness. So I was actually going to say, in a tabletop RPG, either in Animite Tales or D&D or anything like that, if you were to make a character who could generate, manipulate, or use any kind of these powers that we've talked about to do with darkness, generically or fascinatingly, a new variant of how darkness is being considered or conceived, what would you make, or what would you go to?
That's a good question, because the only brush that I had with the Void and what's the name of the Void, the big Kahuna Void guy, because I actually did meet him at one of in Bill's campaign.
The god of the void is known as Dacron.
Dacron. I actually did it. Very chill guy, by the way. Threatened to kill me as I stood, but was very gracious, didn't kill me. Uh, but my character, which I just created, is now it is eternal service. So swings and roundabouts. I think one of the coolest things they did though, and it was like I was playing a character whose obsession with turtles was kind of their undoing, and it's sort
Oh,
of like
no.
I don't know. Long story short, he did that really cool thing of creating a turtle made entirely out of void, which is this beautiful black turtle. And it was just sort of like, swimming around and looking all cute, and then he just destroyed it right in front of my eyes, just right in front of my salad. And it was so heartbreaking, but it's like that's probably what I would do. I would like how if I was, a dark void user, I would probably just create constructs of darkness and have them just be in the world, like kind of being a sort of puppet master, like effigy manipulator, but I just create darkness. It's like, okay, that I now have an army of shadow people at my disposal, and there's nothing you can do about it. So be nice to me. Is probably what I would. It's probably what I would do.
If anyone wants to know what I'm thinking of right now, just go on Google Images and look up Chariot Requiem JoJo's. That's all I'm going to say. That's what I'm imagining right now when you're saying creating puppets of pure darkness, effigies of darkness. So you would actually make sort of like a sort of either a villain or an evil character who actually creates darkness.
I would say that's the thing. Probably, that's the thing. Yeah, and villain at first, I would probably go through like the traditional route of like being a villain at first, and then maybe having, if I was going to do it, maybe a redemption arc, saying no, I could use this for. Oh, actually, I could do it like maybe in reverse, where I start off as a good person, and then because I'm not getting the recognition that I think I deserve, I start using my powers for evil. So I'd be a reverse on that trope, where
I feel like that's a trope already, where it is just
No.
you are either because it's either that thing of like, no, my powers aren't that evil, I can fight it, and then eventually turn to the dark side, so to speak, pun not intended, and then there's also the ones of like the enemy, like I created this sort of like trope, but it's like the enemy who becomes my friend is weaker from the experience. It's the concept of, hey, you're a villain, and you're a very tough bad guy. We're gonna beat you. It takes everything we have to finally beat you. You're now on our side. Uh-oh, they're not as powerful as they once were. Oops. I bloody hate that trope. Why can't they go, hey, we finally have this villain on our side. Let's have them fight all the big bad guys, because clearly they're more powerful. But no, somehow there's some cockamamie reason as to why they don't have as much power as they once did.
Or Daddy Void comes down and it's sort of like you're not doing your bidding, child, and then just takes you out of the game completely.
So I'd say
Because
I
that's
think
what Dacron would do. I think Dacron would do that.
Oh, well, we actually have it that Dacron can't take his powers away from the beings that actually gain power from the void, because it's like they're part, well, because they're a living being from the physical plane, and they can take power from the void, so it's kind of like in their DNA too. So basically they have they can stake as much claim to parts of the void as he can with the entirety of it. Kind of like if I was to say, like, oh, if you earn it, like, have enough money, you can't buy all of the money in the world, because that's not how it works. And it's kind of like that with the void. It's like, even though that he's the god of the void, if there are beings out there that actually have the power of the void in their DNA, he can't take it from them, because he basically is living in a realm of non-existence. They're just seeping a small amount of non-existence into the physical realm and giving it sort of physical matter. And obviously, because reality doesn't know what to do with it, it just changes it into dark matter, or a form of plasma of just pure blackness that swallows up reality. If it comes in contact with physical beings, it damages them in a way that is kind of similar to that of like a poisonous substance along with a decaying substance. But it's also very similar to energy. But any of those creatures that have decay, poison, or energy resistance, it still hurts them. So it's kind of a weird way of explaining it. I don't know if I got that. I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but
it's like anti-life, is what it is. It's like
it's like antimatter, basically. That's the best way I could do it.
It's just sort of like it's when it's the opposite of life, and so when an opposite hits its opposite, it not good things happen. Yeah, basically.
Sam, what about you? What kind of character and what kind of ways would you make a darkness manipulating character?
Well, you know me, I like to go for the different. I like to go for the non-trope options.
I mean, as I said, at this point, I think there's almost no way that you couldn't make a trope character.
Well, mostly because this is semi what I do in real life. I mean, without the powers, I would pretty much make him so that the darkness actually kind of manifests as his own like imagined fears, so to speak.
Okay.
So make it so he probably didn't even really know he had darkness powers. You know, like the X-Men? I was going to probably make like an X-Men character where he can't really control it, but like at night he just like imagines these horrifying things like spiders or bugs or aliens or the whole shebang, and they actually appear to him as horrifying shadow creatures.
So basically similar to like, I think there's two people who have this power, or a similar power to this, in Misfits, where like one girl who can create an imaginary friend and she's real, but then also has sort of her version of the boogeyman who is also real, who tries to kill her. But then there's this other guy who anything he hallucinates when he takes acid, it comes to life. Yeah, so that kind of thing. Or are you thinking Matthew Malloy level, where it's almost like reality manipulation, where it's like,
is he Legion?
No, Matthew Malloy is a character. He was only in one comic, but he basically had this power where he could alter reality. And at one point when he was a kid, he was playing with dinosaurs, and the shadows behind him that he was like playing with, the shadows of the dinosaurs actually killed his parents. That's how powerful he was. That he didn't even know that he was doing it. He also he just got out of like a really bad breakup with his like girlfriend or his wife or something, and his ex sister-in-law is trying to sleep with him, and he just says, "No, go away, go away, go away!" And as he shouts that, she and an entire like 15-mile radius is atomized in a red light. Like, it's not shadow and it's not like manipulation, but I imagine the way that you're saying it like this is, I imagine that, but with darkness, where it's almost like too much of the void is seeping in through them, kind of almost like a medium.
I wouldn't say like this would be an extra dimensional force, so to speak.
Oh, okay.
But mostly because it would be like the idea of like most people are not afraid during the hours of the day because there's light and we can see the light, whereas in the darkness is when his powers fester, so to speak.
I have an idea. How you could use this. Especially
I'm never
in
going
the game.
to use this.
Well, I mean, if someone else uses it with the game, with Adamite Tales.
This is for a story. It wouldn't be for the game because I'd be minimaxing like crazy. I would be going for that tool.
Well, haven't you just completely removed the point of this question and topic then, haven't you?
Yeah, because you know full well what character I'd make if I used darkness.
All right.
What
character would you make if you were to use darkness? What character would you make?
You saw I made the professor.
Oh, would you play them again then in another story?
Yeah, I'd love to play the professor again.
Oh, okay. So for those at home who don't know who that is, would you like to give us a rundown?
Okay, I will give him a rundown. Well, I wanted to make a kind of creepy character. Mostly because I've seen, and also because I really love Drakengard, which I think I mentioned last week, or sometime this week. There's a character in it called Mana, who's a little kid and is like a priestess. She's like 8 years old and is a priestess of the dark, or the dragons, or something like that. Essentially, I made a character. It was a 40-year-old woman, had the kind of power of tactile telepathy. You could like subtly, not really subtly, just kind of manipulate people.
Wasn't it just normal telepathy to begin with?
I don't know, it was tactile telepathy.
Because I'm pretty sure you and I were talking about it. It was just normal telepathy. Because it was using the original ability of telepathy.
It was always tactile telepathy, but she could put her blood into objects.
It was normal telepathy. I got it in my notes.
Well, I never envisioned it as normal telepathy.
Because the way that you envisioned it, because this is
it doesn't really matter for the story at this point,
but like the way that you explained it to me and the way that it was said is that she had the ability of telepathy, and she actually had the power of possession, and that's the ability of telepathy that's actually in the game, and she used it to possess someone, and that's how and then she keeps a small amount of it in the person that she possesses, and it's only tactile.
I mean, I didn't even think it was that. I thought we agreed it was some kind of weird machine thing. But okay, I'll say none of this really matters. The whole idea is essentially she pretty much has like telepathy or tactile telepathy. Doesn't matter. What happens was she worked for a group of people that kind of wanted to help people with powers, or essentially like took in people with powers, but they would. Now I've lost the plot of the story. Thanks, Joe.
Sorry,
Thanks, Joe, for trying to
read it off right next time, I guess.
I mean, at that point, anyway. Basic idea is she decided she saw this child with cool powers of darkness, and thought, you know what, I want that, but I can't really put it into my body. So instead, I will take control of this child's body and let my own body die. Essentially, and kind of kill the child, at least her personality and body, like her personality and soul, essentially, and take over that body. And she had and then therefore she had the power of darkness, like the ability to control shadows and make them into blades and like false and like into creatures and beings if she so decided to. Anything she wanted to do with her imagination, she could do so with the shadows.
Basically, to like put it into the actual mechanics terms, she was a superhuman who wanted the powers of one of the Omegans, Void Child, and literally found a child who had the powers of the Void. They're only called Void Child because that's their like designation. They don't actually have to be children, but upon doing so, she actually gained this body who now has the power to generate and manipulate darkness from the void, and obviously create shadow objects, shadow creatures, shadow beings. And it was a really good build. Like it was really, really interesting.
And it's just so creepy as well that this 40-year-old telepath is using this child as a meat puppet, just essentially just murdering the child.
I actually now have mentally. The picture on the screen as well, so people can actually see sort of like the almost the monster that she could create, and
that's not even the worst. But she made dragons.
Yes,
she made a dragon just to ride on. She could have made just a wee flying carpet or just floated. She decided to pretty much terrify a town by making a giant dragon for her to ride on. Because she could.
Just because she could.
I mean, in fairness, that's what I would do. So I can't really berate her for that. Like, I would totally do that.
That is
And
entirely fair.
the best part is that she can put her blood. This is a mechanic in the game called blood bonding or blood.
Was it blood transfusion?
Yeah, blood transfusion. Yeah.
Blood transfusion. Blood bonding's a different thing. Blood
Yeah.
transfusion, where you can put your blood into objects and imbue them with your power.
Yes, so long as
And
you
she
have the
imbu- she
trade
can-
or the power to do so.
Yes. And she can imbue, if she does so, she can imbue objects with her telepathy, and therefore control people by, no matter where they are, just kind of like, I can control you now. Of course, it's like you have to roll for it, but you can still do it.
So long as they're attached to the object, for instance, if it's like a ring, a necklace, or a headband, or I don't know, a pair of glasses or something, as long as it's something that is touching them at the entire time, the entire duration of which that they are being, possessed. If it's knocked off of them or the part of the body is severed off, in other words, if the object is no longer attached to the part of the body that is conscious, then they snap out of it immediately. But every now and again they could try to fight back, but obviously, considering that she was very powerful, there were only a few people who could have even possibly broken out at the time.
Yeah, imagine kind of the Mad Hatter's wee card thing he does. That's pretty much what she could do.
So I actually have one that I never got to use, and it's a character called Michael, and he was cursed using some kind of basically literal curse from the void, and it was called Despair. There were 6 other curses like it, all based off of like the different fabrications of what darkness means, whether it means death or time or corruption or consumption, havoc or even lies. His was Despair, and he was born a feeble, weak, pitiful, ill creature. He would eventually go on to finding out that out of all of his family members, he was the only one who did not have a power or magical inclination or anything. He went from place to place and from job to job, always got sick easily, always got bullied, and he just had a really terrible time. Awful time. He came to this island because he basically wanted to tour around the world the best chance that he could before he was deciding to eventually end it. Because he just basically wanted to end his own life. He was then brought to a location that he thought that he was basically being kidnapped, and he was offered something for his troubles. Basically, they said, "We want everything that you have to own left," and he just said, like, "Oh, are you mugging me?" And they said, "No. We want everything you have that you own right now." And he was like, "I don't have anything. I just have some change, a wallet, like a rucksack that is empty." And they're like, "Yeah, we'll take that." And then it said, in exchange, we'll give you something. And he wakes up, and he thinks that it's all a dream, and he just got mugged because he's battered and bruised. But little does he know that when he next meets someone and they attack him, he gets stabbed, and he believes that he's going to bleed out. And he's panicking. And in this panic, he blacks out. And when he wakes up, the knife is the only thing on the floor, and everything else is just covered in blood. He's then hunted down by an operation because that they believe that he is some kind of monster. As it turns out, the curse of despair becomes more powerful the more despair the person feels. It grants the wish of the user in a very evil way. I don't want to die, I want to live or go away, as something as simple as healing him, granting him temporary immortality, and completely mulching the person that tried to kill him. As it manifests as darkness seeping out of his soul, attacking anything just to keep it alive, as it feeds on his despair, and any of those who despair or feel depressed around him, it sucks that up and they cannot feel emotion towards that specific subject ever again. So in other words, like, if someone died around this people, like if he walked past a funeral, it would just suck it all up, and then they would never feel sad about this person dying ever again. They could probably kick the coffin back into the dirt and they wouldn't care. And that was it. That's literally it. And
in a sick way, that could be turned into something wholesome. It's like, yeah, we'll only remember the good times.
yes,
from
absolutely.
this ready.
However, it is used to fuel it. And sadly, Michael doesn't know. And the person who gives him the curse actually says, "Oh, that's the beauty of it. We don't need to bring him over to our side, because if he does, he then feels like as if he has someone to trust. So if we find him, we'll attack him. We will make him feel alone, and the curse will keep him alive forever, feeding on his despair and other people's despair, and granting every wish that he ever wants, except from the one that he needs, which is to die or be rid of the curse." And that was sort of like an NPC that I had in a thing, and in the campaign. And they actually, funnily enough, they actually used him against them for a while, like, against the bad guys for a while, because it's like, you've just armed us with this immortal guy, but eventually, like, they started realizing that his curse was getting weaker and weaker, and he started realizing, he has to feel despair, and he now feels like as if he can trust us, and he feels like he's at home with us and everything. He actually feels like he has a purpose. Damn it, this curse is now useless. So, that was both mechanically and story-wise an interesting character, and it did sort of, you just sort of like muster that kind of same sort of thing of, like, I guess you could say that because that, as Sam, as you said, like, one of the things that we are most afraid of in the dark is that it's unknown, like, what is in the dark to us, that we can't see. And I think because of that, we can just literally have it that darkness can have any and all powers, because theoretically, who's to say that it can't do that? Because obviously, we don't know what's in there.
I just think people tend to give the darkness the same powers as the light, so to speak.
It's sort of like a negative, like...
Well, pretty much every power we've mentioned, a Green Lantern could have.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
The power that I don't think they have is teleportation, which kind of some dark people can do, like Noob Saibot.
I mean, literally, Alex said one. Is it Dark Veil or Black Veil?
Dark Veil.
Which their main ability is dark teleportation.
No, that's what I mean. That's what I mean by the darkness. Dark people would have teleportation, but people use light don't tend to have teleportation.
You're also wrong about that, sir.
I meant...
Angels have teleportation. Yeah. Helioportation is actually a big thing. And a lot of people actually always think of this. Light, travelling at the speed of light, although it isn't teleportation, some people use that in a form of teleportation. And also light users can also just be like, I can teleport to any reflective surface or anything like that. So that I've seen a lot of teleporters who have light manipulation.
See, they're pretty much the exact same.
They're pretty much exactly. If anything, I'm helping you with your argument by nullifying the second part of the argument.
and the best part is, actually, there is one difference. And only one difference I'll say about this.
Yeah.
Most dark users actually... The light is okay with darkness because they can outshine the darkness. Dark users tend to be defeated by light users, so to speak. You get my meaning?
Yes, yeah.
Actually, light users can usually generate light, but dark users, except for a few like Shade, tend to require darkness. You get my meaning?
It really depends, because, I mean, there's again, like, the demons in Seven Deadly Sins, they generate darkness.
Oh, then I'm entirely wrong.
But shadow manipulators sometimes have the weakness of they need some level of darkness, otherwise if there's too much light it destroys them. Like, for instance, Pride, if there's too much dark and no light, he can't manipulate shadows, because shadows are obviously, like, they require light to actually appear. Whereas otherwise it's just pure dark. And then what is it? Yeah, because if he's in just purely darkness and there's no light, then he can't make shadows and manipulate them. But also, if the light is too bright, then he can't create them. So, like, there's a moment where they make flashbangs, and when they explode, he then can't see, but also his shadows just like disintegrate,
Yeah.
which is really cool. But I was gonna say, they do use light and dark in a very interesting way in Seven Deadly Sins, because they actually use both of them in the rough same situation. But they actually say dark is more physiological and biological for them. Like, it's actually sometimes it's seen as like almost a lifeblood, quite literally. Whereas in Seven Deadly Sins, light is more similar to like a spiritual thing. I've used the wrong image there. I'm using all of the wrong images here. There we go. I put all the wrong images up on the screen. So yeah, I'd say that like if you wanted to come up with some differences, I think it's more darkness can be considered to be more internal in the forms of physical and physiological, and light is more external or spiritual. But I think both of them have a connection with state of mind.
I was just thinking as well, like a way that you could use the darkness powers if you're like, if you just like are an emitter of it, like you just emit, like say for instance you have the curse of despair, and you're literally just emitting it around you, like you can't really physically move. You just sort of like become like the epicenter of like this pulse of darkness around you, and you're just sort of like you're staying in the same apartment for like decades, and like nobody can really get to you because they're completely blocked off by the darkness that you've created. There's a way of using it. I thought would be cool.
There's a ton of usages.
Yeah.
I think that yeah, just having it where it's just literally just something that is literally controlling things around you or is constantly around you. In Seven Deadly Sins, they use it for one guy covers it in him, so his clothes are made out of his own darkness, which is again super edgelordy, but it works really well because darkness can be hardened and condensed to be stronger than steel. So because of that, it's like he's got this stuff that looks like basic ass clothing, but then someone tries to strike him or stab him, and it just can't even go past the clothing because it's like armor and cloth. He also uses it for wings and all this other sort of stuff. Like, they use it for a ton of different stuff. But I think one other thing is that light and dark is more considered to be to do with death, and light is more considered to be to do with life. Like, light is considered to heal and resurrect and bring back the dead, whereas like darkness is actually considered to actually kill people and only use it to unnaturally raise the dead.
I think it's even more than that as well. I think that a lot of the powers seem to come from like the darkness being an unknown quantity. Like you shed light on things, and when you cloak something in darkness, you like obscure it. So there's a certain mystery to it. Like monsters come out of the dark.
That's what I was saying earlier. It's just like we don't know what's in the dark, so therefore like that's why I said you could create almost any powers from it.
Yeah,
because
that's what I'm saying. Because it's just kind of scary. That's why it's maybe associated with death, because it is like there is a comfort to the light, like you can see what's going on. But when dark comes, you assume that it's something that's bad and scary because you can't actually see through it.
One of the most amazing ways that they've done something in a story narrative is actually talk about those of the darkness. They're always telling the truth because they actually have no reason to. It's just that people don't like the truth that they speak. Like, for instance, it's just like, oh no, you're just lying to us because you're members of the dark and you don't want to tell us the truth. Or maybe we've been telling you the truth the whole time, but you just didn't want to hear it. And then with the light, it's, oh yeah, we are light, so therefore we have to be good. But actually, they're the shadiest ones of all, because they use their light to blind your vision of what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Their light shines, but they blind you from their true intentions. And the dark is scary, but those of it are telling you the truth of what lies inside it, but you don't want to hear it. I think that's a fairly good closing point to really end on with. Do you have any last questions or anything about the next episode, you two?
Silence.
Absolutely.
Just play the darkness, goddammit! It needs a sequel. Play the game. Watch how the police use floodlights to keep you from using your shadow. Then beat you senseless.
Of course, there's Alan Wake. I totally forgot about Alan Wake. Like the fact
It's
that
also
you know,
got the darkness.
I mean, I also made a Dark Souls reference, and I'm actually surprised that I kept it as light as light as that. Really, to be honest. Well, next one, I guess we can do. Again, we'll do another poll and see exactly who wants to who wants to do the next episode. What will the next episode be? I mean, we obviously have the ones from the previous poll that we never got to do, such as natural abilities. For instance, stuff like the Force, Haki, and other really weird abilities that supposedly are natural for the human body to be able to accomplish, which are more almost like superpowers, but everyone treats them as, oh yeah, everyone can do this. So natural abilities.
I'm pretty sure, don't they treat the Force in the Star Wars universe as like wizards and wizards?
Yes, but they do actually confirm that technically almost any creature can actually manipulate the Force.
I mean, they say a lot of things.
Also, even if we
is that still canon though?
Even if we were not to say that, they actually do state that it's a form of science because of the midichlorians. But so technically, it's natural. No, it's now canon, so we have to talk about it. But also, even if we didn't, there is an alien race that can create bubbles that are absent of the Force, and that is their racial ability. So we have to talk about this at some point.
If we're going to talk about that, I'm just going to go into a long rant about the Sith Lords, the great.
Well, no, we're not. So we'd be more talking about just genuinely like what really.
I mean, I know that.
What really
but
are
I get
our
into
pet,
nonetheless.
What really are our pet peeves on natural abilities? And I hate to say it, Sam, but you might be tagged out for that one because we actually might have a guest for that one.
Ooh.
And I know that you don't like talking about One Piece or
but I'm leaving.
Baki.
I mean,
well,
let's be
at
honest.
least you won't be able to bring out the flip chart. You know, I mean, Sam has a whole flip chart of what is and isn't canon in Star Wars.
Because my potential guest for this actually did say something about, or at least reminded me that technically there is a show that you talk about a bit, Steven Universe, that actually does have unnatural, supernatural abilities that are supposed to be actually natural. So, like, you know, that either any humans can do it, or at least a certain specific species or race can do it. I can't remember if it was that or if it was something else, but it was like, oh yeah, it's not magic, it's just this special ability or technique.
It's just like alien, just sort of alien powers, you know, kind of. It's like, yeah, it's magic, but it's not magic because aliens done it.
So that's if we can get that's if we can get them on for that next episode. If not, we still have the other possibilities, such as stockpiling, that you came up with. Sam, you came up with the other one. I cannot remember. I'm now looking at the old poll.
Power scarcity and power
scarcity and power abundance. Yes, and I said darkness, if not unnaturally natural abilities. So yeah. So either way, if there are any other particular ones that anyone wants to hear from, send them in the links. Send them in the description below, or no, sorry, not in the description below. And put them in the comments below, or tweet me at AnimiteTales or UngoaJoe as I'm known. If anyone would like to tell me what I said or did wrong this episode, please post it in the comments below at AnimiteTales. That's right, on YouTube. Thank you very much. It's time to sign off, since you now need me to tell you.
Bye.
Good. See you in the future.
And as always, ciao ciao. For now.